This is Matthew Cratter from Trade University, and today I want to talk about whether your money is backed by anything. I often get this question in relation to Bitcoin, saying, how can Bitcoin have any value when it's not backed by any government and it's not backed by any commodity? If you think about it, though, the money we use right now has a very nebulous backing. I bet you haven't looked closely at a US dollar bill. If you look at the top, though, you'll see that it's actually a Federal Reserve note. It has some shady connection to the U.S. Treasury as well. There's obviously the signature of the treasurer here. Who's the Federal Reserve? Well, they're the crazy-eyed money printers. They don't print money, obviously, on paper that much anymore, and that's really up to the Bureau of Engraving. But they do print a lot of digital money and devalue the US dollar. This is a very big difference from what the US dollar used to look like. If you look at a dollar from 1928, you can see that it's actually called a silver dollar. It's backed by silver. It's also called a silver certificate. This is a very big change in money that's happened over the last 100 years, really since the invention and creation of the US Central Bank, which is called the Federal Reserve. You can see just how much better the money used to look, and it used to be backed by an actual tangible physical commodity. You could take this piece of paper, you could go to the US Treasury, and you could say, give me some silver in exchange. Now, that exchange rate varied over time. It was fixed by the government, and then it was finally severed in 1971 with the Nixon shock, when the connection between gold, which was the real backing of the US dollar, and the US dollar was severed. This was the Nixon shock, which happened in August of 1971. We're just celebrating the 50-year anniversary of it. Now, what is the US dollar backed by since 1971 if it's no longer redeemable for gold? Well, it's backed by a couple of things that come off the top of my head. The first one is the US dollar is the required currency that you need to use if you want to pay US taxes. And you have to pay US taxes, whether you're a domestic corporation or a foreign corporation that does business in the US or an individual. And so there's intrinsic demand for US dollars from all these people like you and me who have to pay their taxes using this funny money, whether the paper version or the digital version. So that's the first thing that the US currency, that the US dollar is backed by. The second thing that it's backed by is it's backed by the threat of war. This, of course, is Saddam Hussein, who's the former ruler of Iraq. He used to be supported by the US. We gave him billions of dollars, and then we decided to go after him and have him killed. The main reason for that had nothing to do with airplanes hitting skyscrapers in Manhattan. It had to do with the fact that Iraq had just started selling their crude oil for euros instead of selling it for US dollars. Part of the modern agreement since 1971, when Nixon severed the convertibility of the US dollar, the global agreement is commodity trade, especially crude oil trade, should be conducted in US dollars. This is how we get the idea or the name petrodollars. And so the US dollar is also backed by this threat. If you try to use it, if you try to sell your oil or do other trade or commodity, sell other commodities for other currencies, you might end up in trouble. I'm not trying to be an apologist for Saddam Hussein. He was a brutal dictator, and so not trying to justify what happened to him, but just talking about one of the real reasons behind what happened to him. If you're finding this video helpful so far, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button and share the video with a few friends. So Saddam Hussein is not the sole example we have of the U.S. engaging in proof of war to back its currency. We, of course, have Muammar Gaddafi. Again, I'm not a fan of this guy. He was also a pretty brutal dictator, but he did do some things that got him in trouble. There are a lot of brutal dictators out there who don't get attacked. But when they start selling their oil for euros, which Saddam did, and also Qaddafi did. The other thing Qaddafi was doing shortly before he was killed by the U.S. government was he was trying to issue a new form of currency. He wanted it really to be a pan-African form of currency. It was being issued by the central bank of Libya. It was called the dinar, and it was backed or supposedly backed by the country's gold. So if you're a foreign leader and you decide to try to undermine the U.S. dollar, you might end up 6 feet under, like Saddam and Qaddafi did. The U.S. dollar is not backed by gold or any other precious metals, but it's backed by the threat of violence. You need to use U.S. dollars to pay your taxes, or we will put you in a metal box, called a jail sometimes. You must sell your crude oil only for U.S. dollars, or we will put you 6 feet under. This is how the U.S. dollar works. These are the two main pillars that support the backing of the U.S. dollar. By contrast, Bitcoin is backed and supported by proof of work. U.S. dollar supported by proof of war, proof of jail. Both of these things are very energy intensive, as we know, and very expensive. We spent, call it 5 or 6 trillion in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan over the past 20 years. Also, if we count the invasion of Libya as well. So you don't really have a choice when you're backing currencies. They need to be backed by energy. You can have them backed by computers trying to find a special number, as Bitcoin miners do, or you could have it backed by the energy usage of the U.S. military, which is much, much higher than the energy usage of proof of work. The nice thing about Bitcoin is there's no coercion with Bitcoin. You can choose to use it or choose not to use it. The weird thing about the US dollar and other fiat currencies is, if they're so wonderful, why do you need to force me at gunpoint to use it? If it's a great product, shouldn't I just want to use it? Obviously, it's not a great product, and so it has to be backed by the threat of violence. It's an especially bad product because it's constantly devaluing over time. The US dollar looks very stable over short periods of time, but over long periods of time, it's guaranteed by the central bank to lose money. Just like the US dollar, Bitcoin is not backed by anything. It's not backed by gold or silver. But as we said, the nice thing about Bitcoin is it's not a coercive form of money. You're free to use it or free not to use it. In many ways, Bitcoin is only a social consensus that's enforced by software, and it's a social consensus among people who agree on very basic things, like the monetary policy of Bitcoin, that we're going to have these approximately 4-year halvings, and also that we have a maximum money supply of 21 million. So it's a social consensus around these things, enforced and validated by the Bitcoin core software. This is one of the things that makes Bitcoin very difficult to ban, is it's like banning an idea or a social consensus. It's so decentralized and so almost nebulous that it's very difficult to ban. As we said, Bitcoin, just like the US dollar, is not backed by anything. It's not backed by a commodity. Unlike the US dollar, there's no central authority that issues Bitcoin. Bitcoin is issued according to the protocol. There are only so many Bitcoin that can be mined every day. Anyone can become a Bitcoin miner, etc. Bitcoin is governed by algorithmic rules, not rulers. So the US dollar is governed by rulers like the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, the IRS, the police, all these unelected folks. Bitcoin is governed by software. It's decentralized, it's permissionless, it's cryptographically secure, it's peer-to-peer money. Now, wouldn't Bitcoin be better if we backed it with gold or something else that is valuable? I often get this question in my DMs and emails and comments, and I would say the answer is definitely not. We've already been there. We've done that with precious metal-backed currencies. The US dollar was backed by gold really up until 1971, until really in the 60s, the U.S. started cheating and printing more dollars than it had gold. And then what happened in the late 60s, early 70s, is Europe, in particular France, called its bluff and said, okay, I've got all these U.S. dollars. Why don't you send me, I'd like to exchange it for gold. At this point, everyone knew that the U.S. had printed more dollars than it had gold to back it. And so Nixon had to close the convertibility window, and he had to stop allowing people to convert dollars into gold. There simply was not enough gold owned by the U.S. government. And so this is really the birth of the modern fiat currency era. So turning Bitcoin into an asset-backed cryptocurrency, maybe rolling back the clock and trying to turn it into a gold-backed currency or something like that, doesn't make any sense. It makes as much sense as an automobile that's pulled by a horse. There is this sort of intermediate period in automobile history when some people had the idea that maybe you should use horses to pull a car. I believe this is a car that has an internal combustion engine, and yet they're still using it with a horse. The thing about Bitcoin is it allows you to get rid of the asset that backs your currency. It allows you to get rid of the horse that drives your car. And people who want to make Bitcoin into an asset-backed cryptocurrency, it's really like people who want to back who wanted to use a car with a horse. The whole point of cars is that they get rid of horses. It's still nice to ride a horse, but you certainly don't need one for your car. The other problem, of course, is you have the same problem that you had with gold and precious metal-backed currencies. If you back Bitcoin with some tangible asset, where do you end up storing that asset? Who gets to control the underlying asset? Who gets to verify the underlying supply, whether it's gold or silver or real estate or crude oil? And this leads us right back to the centralization of control. This is something, fortunately, that Bitcoin fixes. Bitcoin, unlike fiat currency, unlike gold-backed currency, unlike gold itself, even, Bitcoin is the purest form of money. It's the Platonic form of money. It's perfect, it's celestial, it's backed by pure energy in the form of proof of work. And Bitcoin is present anywhere the blockchain is. It's completely decentralized. This is a map of all the Bitcoin full nodes, at least the reachable nodes. We can see that there are almost 13,000 of them. They're all around the world. How do you shut down Bitcoin? You can shut it down in China, but then the miners move elsewhere. These full nodes are everywhere as well. And so it's very difficult to shut down a decentralized system that is really nothing more than a social consensus backed by energy. So if you're going to have a form of money that's not backed by anything, it really makes a lot more sense to have a form of money like Bitcoin, which has no rulers, has no control, cannot be co-opted or taken control of. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.